Once upon a time, along the shimmering shores of East Africa, there existed a place where the whispers of the African tribes mingled with the melodies of Arabian traders. This place, known as the Swahili Coast, was a cradle of cultural fusion and bustling trade from as early as the 8th century. Here, amidst the golden sands and azure waters, a unique identity emerged, giving birth to what we now call Swahili culture. Picture vibrant city-states like Mombasa, Mogadishu, and Zanzibar, each a bustling hub of independent trade. From the 12th to the 15th century, these coastal gems thrived, engaging in commerce with distant African tribes stretching as far as Zimbabwe. Yet, their reach extended beyond the continent, as they traded with great nations across the vast Indian Ocean, such as Arabia, Persia, India, and China. As the Swahili coast flourished, the 16th century brought an ominous turn with the arrival of the Portuguese. With their insatiable appetite for power, they wreaked havoc on the once balanced trade network. Cities crumbled, forts rose, and chaos replaced the harmony that had defined the Swahili people's way of life. The term Swahili itself is a poetic derivation from the Arabic word Sahil, meaning coast. It encapsulates not only the coastal stretch from Mogadishu to Kilwa, but also the rich linguistic tapestry that emerged. Born from the Bantu language of the indigenous people, Swahili evolved, absorbing Arabic influences and becoming the lingua franca of East Africa. Even today, its echoes resonate in the national languages of Kenya and Tanzania. In the ancient days, the Swahili people's prosperity stemmed from agriculture and animal husbandry, nourished by the bountiful annual rainfall and the abundant seafood along the shallow coastal waters. Trade, carried out by skillful navigators in dugout canoes and small sailing vessels, began weaving its threads along the coast during the region's Iron Age. Coral reefs and coastal islands provided both protection and convenient rest stops for these seafarers. Initially, the Bantu people, who once inhabited the interior, gradually migrated to the coast, bringing about over 400 new settlements. Stone, particularly coral blocks bound with mortar, replaced traditional mud and wood, shaping the coastal landscape. They engaged in profitable trade, exchanging shell jewelry for agricultural treasures from the fertile interior. As the trade networks expanded, so did the exchange of ideas in art and architecture. The language of Swahili, like a gentle breeze, spread further, covering 1,600 kilometers of Africa's coastline. The Swahili people, with their rich cultural tapestry, ventured forth, making connections with distant lands such as Madagascar, already steeped in a history of cross-cultural exchanges, including influences from Indonesia. From the 7th century onwards, the horizon teemed with the graceful silhouettes of Arab dhows, their triangular sails billowing in the breeze as they navigated the waters. These traders hailed from distant lands such as the Red Sea, Cairo in Egypt, Arabia, and the Persian Gulf, bringing with them a wealth of goods and cultures. The rhythm of trade danced to the tune of the monsoon winds, which alternated their course with the changing seasons. With sails unfurled, these intrepid sailors embarked on long-distance voyages, connecting distant shores with the Swahili coast. As the winds whispered tales of distant lands, the settlements along the coast blossomed, welcoming newcomers and their stories. In the mid-8th century, the Swahili coast became a melting pot of cultures as Muslim traders from Arabia and Egypt settled in the bustling towns and trading centers. Alongside them came settlers from Persia, known as the Shirazi people, weaving their stories into the rich tapestry of Swahili culture. Amidst this cultural fusion, languages mingled and customs intertwined, giving birth to an entirely unique way of life. Trade flourished, fueled by the exchange of goods from distant lands. From the heart of Africa's interior, treasures such as gold, ivory, and exotic hardwoods found their way to the bustling city-states of the Swahili coast. Meanwhile, goods from Arabia, Persia, and India enriched the local markets, tantalizing the senses with spices, silk, and fine pottery. In this marketplace, commodities exchanged hands in a system of barter, each item telling a story of its origins. Yet, some cities, like Kilwa, stood out with their ability to mint their own copper coinage, adding a glint of metallic splendor to the bustling markets. Cowrie shells and copper ingots became the currency of choice, fostering a sense of unity amidst the diversity. As the cities of the Swahili coast bustled with trade and cultural exchange, they were governed by a unique blend of tradition and authority. Each city stood as an independent entity, ruled by a single leader, often a sultan whose succession was sometimes marked by the nod of his predecessor. By the 12th century, the corridors of power were dominated by the affluent Muslim merchant class, aided by a council of advisors and a judge drawn from the most influential merchant families. Society, like the ebb and flow of the tides, found its structure in three distinct tiers. At the helm were the governors, merchants, craftsmen, and religious leaders, their lineage woven from a blend of Arab and African ancestry. Beneath them stood the slaves, native Africans untouched by foreign blood, while Arab and Persian traders who had not settled permanently formed the third group. Religion, too, played a defining role in the fabric of Swahili society. Islam arrived on the coastal breeze in the 7th century, carried by Arab traders whose wooden mosques dotted the landscape by the 9th century. Yet, the form of Islam practiced along the Swahili coast bore its own unique imprint. While Sunni Islam became the prevalent faith, echoes of indigenous beliefs lingered, intertwining with the rituals of daily worship. Cemeteries bore witness to this synthesis, with tombs often adorned with precious goods, a stark departure from Islamic tradition. Amidst the labyrinthine streets of the Swahili cities, architecture stood as a testament to the region's rich heritage. Mosques, though smaller than their counterparts elsewhere, bore the mark of Swahili craftsmanship. The Great Mosque at Kilwa, with its monolithic coral columns and vaulted ceilings, stood as a beacon of architectural prowess. Nearby, the Hujani Kubwa Palace, a sprawling complex perched on a sandstone promontory, echoed with the whispers of history. Its domed ceilings and tiered seating bore witness to the ingenuity of Swahili architects, who left their mark by embedding pieces of Chinese porcelain into the walls for decorative effect. Yet, amidst the grandeur of mosques and palaces, the heartbeat of Swahili society resided in its humble dwellings. Rectangular buildings of wattle and daub or mud brick, crowned with palm leaf roofs, lined the narrow streets. In Kilwa, stone houses stood as a testament to prosperity, their interiors cooled by darkened chambers and adorned with carved wooden frames and porcelain bowls. As the sun continued to rise and set over the Swahili coast, a dark shadow loomed on the horizon, heralding the beginning of the end. The year was 1498-9 when Vasco da Gama, a daring Portuguese explorer, navigated the treacherous waters around the Cape of Good Hope and set his sights on the riches of the East African coast. The Portuguese, driven by the thirst for dominance over the Indian Ocean trade network, arrived with superior weapons and a relentless ambition for control. The Swahili city-states, caught off guard and lacking unity, found themselves unable to mount a substantial defense. The Portuguese, with their eyes set on both sides of the Indian Ocean, swiftly established fortresses at strategic locations, Sofala in 1505, Mozambique Island in 1507, and Shama in 1526. These formidable structures stood as a stark reminder that the Portuguese were there to stay. However, the arrival of the Europeans did not bring the promised era of cooperation or mutually beneficial trade. Instead, they sought to exploit the region, extracting valuable resources without regard for the consequences. Rival traders were ruthlessly eliminated, cities razed, and precious trade goods plundered. As the Portuguese strived to secure their grip on the trade routes, their short-sighted policies and administrative negligence paved the way for a shift in the tides of commerce. Regional trade routes veered northwards, steering clear of the Portuguese strongholds. In a desperate attempt to salvage their control, the Europeans set their sights on the source of valuable commodities, targeting the kingdom of Mutapa in modern-day Zimbabwe. By 1633, the Portuguese had conquered Mutapa, only to discover that the promised wealth of gold was not as plentiful as anticipated. Faced with the harsh reality of tropical diseases and lacking the manpower to sustain their conquests, the Europeans retreated from northern and central East Africa, leaving the region to navigate its own fate. Mozambique became the focal point of their attention, but not before the disruptive influence of the Portuguese had marked the end of the Swahili coast's golden age.